He threw away 7,500 Bitcoin. Now it's worth hundreds of millions. In 2013, a British man named James Howells was cleaning out his house. Among the old electronics and computer parts he decided to throw away was a hard drive. At the time, it probably looked completely worthless. Just another piece of old hardware. But there was one problem. That hard drive contained the private keys to around 7,500 Bitcoin. And once it was gone, there was no password reset. No bank to call, no customer service, no way to simply log back in. The hard drive was eventually taken to a landfill in Newport, Wales. And that should have been the end of the story. Except Bitcoin kept rising. What had once been worth relatively little eventually became worth tens of millions of dollars, then hundreds of millions. And Howells knew exactly where his fortune had gone. It hadn't been stolen. It hadn't been hacked. It was buried somewhere underneath thousands upon thousands of tons of garbage. So he came up with a plan. He wanted to search the landfill, but not with a shovel and a few friends. He wanted a full-scale recovery operation, engineers, excavators, security teams, specialist equipment, and technology capable of sorting through enormous amounts of waste. The idea was simple. Find the section of the landfill where the hard drive was believed to have been dumped. Dig through it, recover the drive, and hope the data could somehow still be saved. At one point, Howells even proposed sharing part of the Bitcoin with the local council if they allowed the search to go ahead. But there was a major problem. Digging through a landfill isn't just expensive. It can also create serious environmental, safety, and legal issues. And local authorities repeatedly refused to allow it. But Howells didn't give up. As Bitcoin became more valuable, the potential reward became harder and harder to ignore. Those 7,500 Bitcoin were no longer just a forgotten digital asset. At certain prices, they represented several $100 million. And you even have a rough idea where it is. Imagine knowing that somewhere beneath a mountain of trash, there might be a tiny hard drive containing enough money to completely change your life. But you're not allowed to dig. Over the years, Howells returned with increasingly ambitious recovery plans. Some involved outside investors willing to fund the search in exchange for a percentage of the recovered Bitcoin. Other proposals included artificial intelligence and robotic equipment designed to help identify the drive among thousands of tons of waste. It became less like searching for an old computer part and more like planning a high-tech treasure hunt. But every year that passed created another problem. The landfill kept growing. More waste was added. The search area became harder to isolate. And even if the hard drive could somehow be found, there was still one enormous question. Would it even work? Years underground could have exposed it to moisture, chemicals, pressure, and physical damage. The entire operation could cost millions of dollars, only to end with a completely useless piece of metal. And still, Howells kept trying. Because the Bitcoin itself was never actually gone. It still exists on the blockchain. It hasn't been spent. It hasn't been transferred. It hasn't disappeared. The only thing missing is access to it. And that's what makes this story so brutal. James Howells didn't lose his fortune in a market crash. He wasn't hacked. He wasn't scammed. He simply threw away the one object that gave him access to it. And more than a decade later, those Bitcoin are still sitting untouched. Not destroyed, not stolen, just inaccessible. Somewhere beneath thousands of tons of rubbish in Wales. Maybe the hard drive will never be found. Maybe even if it is found, the damage will be too severe. But as long as those Bitcoin remain untouched, the story never feels completely finished. Because somewhere beneath that landfill, one of the most expensive mistakes in crypto history may still be waiting to be uncovered. Enjoyed the story? There's more coming. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next video.